I'm going to talk about a subject that hasn't been covered in that much detail at Moogfest, I think. Roger Lynn started talking about it with an instrument a couple of days ago, and I want to continue that discussion a little bit, what I've been doing in the field of alternative controllers, and how our modern age of computers and digital processing actually allow alternative digital controllers to feel analog. Basically, that's the basis of what I'm going to talk about, with a bunch of demos and just some samples and things that I've been working on. This is me. My name is Geert Bevan. Probably never heard of me. I didn't do that much electronic music for a long time. I started when the first FM synthesizers came out. I was a guitar player. I wanted to try synthesizers, and I thought that they kind of sucked. It was nothing compared to what I could get out of my guitar. It was nothing compared to the emotional connection that I could have with a string that vibrates, with a string that I put my fingertip on and that I can really feel this visceral connection with. So I had this huge hiatus of 20 years, I think, where I didn't do anything in electronic music, and then I bought myself a Godin MIDI guitar, which was kind of okay, but it still sucked. I tried a few different MIDI converter boxes, DACs on the roll, and every time there was something that wasn't quite right. And then all of a sudden, this instrument was announced, the Eigenharp. I think it's about 4.5 years ago now. So I was kind of blown away by what I saw, because it's got this similar form factor as a guitar. One of the things that I personally am very passionate about, and it's also something that is not being discussed a lot in electronic music, it's the physical aspect. It's something that you can feel close to you. I can stand up, I can walk around with it, I have a strap that I can put on, I can walk on stage, I can sit down, I can make this an extension of my body. Very similar actually to, I've seen Dora play the theremin yesterday, and the way that she creates her own space with that instrument. No, but you create your own space. It's your space, right? That you live in. And I've never felt that with a keyboard. Having my hands turned to the front like that, to me that feels like working, because I'm a programmer. Right? I'm touching my keyboard when I'm doing this. When I'm doing this, I'm in a relaxed position. So that's just one of my pet peeves. And so I saw the Eigenharp coming out, and I ordered one. And then I was kind of lucky. Thank you. So I was kind of lucky because I quit my job, and Eigenlabs was looking for a C++ programmer, and I had been in C++ for a long time. But I said, yeah, what the hell, I'll apply for it, and they hired me. So I worked on the software of the instrument right after it came out. I worked on actually having it interconnect with anything else out there. You know, the MIDI implementation, the fact that it was able to translate these very sensitive sensors to a meaningful format, and to be able to actually map the per note expression that you get with the Eigenharp to existing synthesizers. So I did that for a while, and it allows you to do things like this with one key. And I have the same connection that I have with the guitar. I feel the keys on my fingertips, and I feel it pivot around that three-dimensional axis. And when in the first, actually still happening, sometimes I just think about touching the keys just as the physical interaction with it. Just as with my guitar, like I'm dreaming about feeling that particular guitar against my body. It's the same thing that I have with the Eigenharp. So that is kind of new, I think, in electronic music. There are not many controllers that try to go into that direction. And so I think I want to just go over a very short history of the controllers. You all know about it, but I want to repeat it again because I think it's quite important. So we started off with that when we did synthesizers, and a lot of people are still using the theremin. The metal strips and touchpads are a little bit less used nowadays, but they still directly translated your personal current that's flowing through your body towards the instrument that you're playing. You're part of it. You're part of the equation. No one is ever going to be able to make the sound the way that you make the sound when you use the theremin and these metal touchpads. It's very different from what we're used to in most synthesizer situations. And so we went on to that because people wanted to play fixed pitches, which is a bit easier to play polyphonically or to translate existing work, and it was still quite connected, right? You had all the knobs that were still able to very finely, that is why everyone is like sitting around here with a modular mark and it's still current. The fact that analog synthesizers allow you through currents to express your emotions. And then something happened. Then we went to this, and the problem with that is that by putting that digital layer in between, all of a sudden your body is not part of the musical current anymore. That is where the term controller was invented. Something that controls the sound, and everyone started to focus on the sound. We got more powerful synthesizers that were able to create so much sound that it's almost impossible to find room inside the sound even. But it became more and more distantiated, up to a point that a lot of the controllers basically just are a bunch of triggers. Which is a shame, because we have all that digital power that allows you to create such beautiful sounds, but there is no way to actually bring your body and your own chaos of your fingers and of your breathing and of your position on stage. There is no way to bring that into the sound equation. So that is where I started getting interested in the controllers, and I'm going to talk a little bit about a few of those. There is the Continuum. I've got the Continuum myself also. I absolutely love it, but I sadly had no time for it. Sally, who sits there, who is so friendly to host me here, so it saved me on hotel costs. She's a magnificent Continuum player, and if you've got any questions about that, she'll probably be more than happy to fill you in or to give you some demonstrations or to point you towards videos that are wonderful. Then there's the instrument. I don't know who was here 2 days ago when Roger introduced it. It's quite an interesting journey that he went on, because he tries to serve the middle stream. It's not as advanced as the Continuum or the Eigenharp, but the problem with very advanced controllers or detection mechanisms and sensors is that they're extremely expensive, and no one wants to pay that kind of money anymore. So Roger tries to find something that is just good enough so that you're still part of the equation. And that I think that this is probably going to be a key device, because it allows everyone that's used to a grid layout with lights to get three-dimensional control over each individual note. And then maybe, if this is something that you feel very passionate about, move on later to more advanced versions of it or to other devices. So I'm extremely fortunate again. I got to know Roger when working on the Eigenharp, and I'm helping him out now also on the software of the instrument. So it's quite exciting to be part of this whole revolution, in my opinion, in terms of creating digital music. So there's another controller. I don't know if anyone has heard about it, the Leap Motion controller. Yeah?
Actually, we're just trying to write software to connect it to the camera so it turns into visuals really nicely.
We have to talk. So the Leap Motion controller, I have it here, haven't hooked it up. It's this little device. It's about the size of a pack of gum, and it measures your hand position in 3 dimensions of both your hands. And something that's quite unique is it also measures inclination, so the angles of your hands. It can measure the states of your fingers, so if your hand is open or closed, and do that for both hands at the same time. It does that also at an amazingly fast speed. So for the kind of data that is flowing through there, it ends up at about 200 Hertz, which is sufficient for you to not become aware of the digital artifacts in the translation. And so I've been working on some software for the last year. It's called Gecko, that uses the Leap Motion Controller to actually create music, to send out MIDI. And it was really an experiment, and if it's okay, I'd like to show you a promo video that I did 2 months ago with some excerpts of what people came up with. It's this blank canvas that I put out and said, okay, I'm going to see what people are going to create in terms of unique expressions and unique worlds and universes when they have just their hands in space. So let me start that. Oh. It's using the wrong audio interface. So this is a composer that is rearranging his orchestra while playing with his keyboard. So he's got his left hand where he plays the composer, and you can see it coming into view. So everything you heard was played live. Obviously a beatboxer, and he put out that video 2 weeks after the software came out, which I thought was quite amazing. A guy that tries to play clarinet with it, and it sounds very emotional. There's a DJ that is rearranging his tracks and bringing up in intensity and manipulating the different filters, triggering beats, triggering different universes that he's in. And so the fact that it's such high bandwidth allows him to be so interactive. And it's an upcoming Russian artist, and he is able to do all this in the train. So he just has a Leap Motion Controller and an Akai MPC, and he creates music like that. And so this is going to be kind of a premiere. It's got this other device on me, which is called the Mayo. It is also a gesture control device. It is not as precise as the rest of them, because I know what their limitation is Bluetooth, and more specifically lower energy Bluetooth only allows them to get to 50 Hertz. But I know that the device internally measures at much more detail and that it will grow faster as time goes on. So what it allows you to do, so this is a prototype. I finished the first version of this a week and a half ago and jammed for the first time with Sally 3 days ago with it. So we're going to see if it's going to work. I'm not sure. Apparently it doesn't. But I did test it before, but it doesn't. Okay, let's try again. So one of the downsides of this prototype is that I have to train it each time. This is going to be better once they release the final version. And so one of the things it does, it detects concrete postures of your hands, which you have to train at this moment. Let me redo that. And on top of those discrete postures, it also detects the position of your arm in 3D space. It's going to be a little bit flaky, but let's see if it works. Now I need to... So this is what happens with the prototype. I need to restart Alchemy. So I've got Alchemy running on the same iPad. This is one of the nice things about what this is going to be. It's going to be self-contained. You just have your iOS device and the Mayo. So let me set this up in Alchemy. Okay, so this gives me sound. Now it should work. But I thought I'd include it in this talk because it kind of shows where we'll be going in the future with controllers. It's still a prototype, as I mentioned, but one of the things that is possible with it, and I just received the second alpha version of this, is that you're going to be able to put one on each arm, possibly even on your feet or on your legs, and so your whole body position while you're moving and dancing on stage allows you to actually interact with what's going on. I found at this time, due to the lack of bandwidth, that it's easier to manipulate soundscapes like the ones that I just triggered than to actually play musical notes. But I guess that as that resolution becomes more precise and faster, I really see this going in many directions, certainly with dancers on stage and people that have a good body language. So that brings me to my personal favorite of all these that I still continue playing, which is the Eigenharp. I already talked a little bit about it. So one of the kind of facts that I want to bring out is how precise it is. People don't realize that the keys of the Eigenharp are not switches. They are actually mounted on metal construction that allows you to pivot in 3 dimensions. And then underneath is an optical sensor that will detect the inclinations of the key in 3 dimensions, and it measures that very quickly at 2000 hertz for each axis. And it also measures it so finely that it actually detects, I'm gonna read it from screen, 400 nanometers of movement of the key. So, bye Doris. Yeah. Thanks for joining in. Yeah. So, what happens when you work at these kind of data rates and the precision is that you have an element of chaos that enters your performance, just as with a traditional instrument. It's going to be important how you position your hand. It's going to be important if you're sweating or not. It's going to be important if your nails are clipped or if they aren't clipped. All these things are on your mind when you're playing traditional instruments. They're less on your mind when you're usually playing electronic instruments. But I think, personally, this makes everything come to life. Your personal performance will never be the same. You will start wondering about playing in tune again, which is interesting. So yeah. And one of the things that I hear people say is, yeah, well, you don't really need that amount of precision. What is it useful for? Because you will be going to MIDI anyway. And it's, in the best case, an instrument, soft synth or an instrument might understand polypressure, it might understand MIDI CC, but almost nothing is able to leverage 14-bit MIDI CC. So what does it matter? Well, the areas where it matters is when you're going to play the envelope of the sounds that you're playing, and you're going to create sharp attacks or sharp releases with your fingers. And you will have a lot of changes in a very short amount of time. And the fact that it goes from 0 to 127 is really besides the point at that time. It's how fast is it going from 0 to 127? And if you're not measuring it fast enough, it's going to jump from 0 to 127. While you might actually have a linear slope, might be curved or concave, or it might be all over the place, but that is your own impulse. If you don't measure fast enough, it's just going to jump. And you're going to get a lot of different results out of that. So this is the sound that I played before. And you can hear it here. So here I'm actually using the attack of my envelope of my finger to play the sound. But if I play a very sharp attack, it's going to become just a percussive sound because I'm releasing the finger fast enough also. And one of the things that I can do also is just flick the key and try to get some resonance on the key itself going, because it's gonna, obviously, when you flick something to one side, physics is gonna, there's a spring underneath it, so it's gonna flick it back. which is going to give you something in the sound also, and that allows you to interact with your instrument in a very emotional way, well, in my opinion anyway. So this is going to play a little piece here that people that know me have already heard, but I haven't come up with another one yet, because I'm doing all this stuff after hours, and I have a day job. So, but this piece to me kind of reflects a lot of the uniqueness of playing with a controller with that level of precision. Also using a synthesized sound, just one sound coming out of any mode. Thank you. Are there any questions at this point before I kind of go to the next section? Yes, sir?
The Mayo, is that one of your creations as well?
So the question is the Mayo one of my creations? No, so what I usually, I'm a software engineer, I'm not a hardware engineer. So what I do is I try to find controllers that interest me and that might be repurposed for music with the Leap Motion controller. The Mayo is a general purpose gesture detection device. That came kind of interestingly out of very humane research, because they were looking for ways to allow blind people to control the digital world around them while they're on the move. So this is where their research came from. Yes, sir?
I thought that controller was incredibly expressive, but what about if that's not particularly like your playing position style in a way? Is there like anything else just like that, or do you find other ways to play it?
Yeah, so the question is, if you're not comfortable to play like this, like a cello or a guitar, can you use the eigenharp differently, or are there other controllers that allow you to do a similar thing? Well, you can. So this is detachable. You can lay it on a flat surface. I've seen quite a lot of people do that, but more specifically with the smaller one. So that's one possibility. Put that back in. Another possibility, if you want to kind of outdo all the guitar players in the world, you can put your strap on. And I forgot to put a little piece on here, but you can actually hook it in here, and it's going to hold in place. It's fully balanced, so you've got the same experience as a guitar player. And then in terms of sitting position, well, Duncan is another Eigenharp player. He's coming over from Bermuda. I think you play more here, right, against your shoulder. Yeah. And that's quite interesting because everyone is still figuring out how to play this. So there are different positions possible. Now, the other controllers that I think that get very close to this, there's another one that I personally haven't been able to try yet. It's called the Soundplane, made by Madrona Labs, which is made out of wood, and I can imagine it's very nice to touch. And it's got similar kind of approaches. It's got some downsides in the sensor technology in that certain close touches will not be registered, but it's fast enough to get this kind of expressiveness out of it, and it lies flat on the surface. It's a little bit like the instrument, but made out of wood and higher resolution. Okay, yes sir?
So yeah, in terms of resolution, so are you not necessarily limited to using MIDI as your communication protocol, but you like send OSC data from that thing?
And so the question is, since the resolution of the Eigenharp is higher than the MIDI 7-bit, is it possible to output it in higher resolution and other protocols? So the way that the Eigenharp goes to your computer is actually through this cable. So this is a cable that I can walk away with. Right? This is intended to perform on stage. It's not a USB cable. With a USB cable you have maximum reach of 2 meters. If you're going to start putting on extenders, it's going to add delay, and it can create some problems in terms of the stability of your USB signal. And also, these connectors are not really meant for moving around on stage. So what happens is this cable goes into a base station that's on the ground there that powers the Eigenharp, and from there onward it is sent in full resolution without any assumptions about the protocol that it's going to use to the computer, and on the computer it's going to use the amazing processing power that actually brings us to the next section of computers nowadays to transform that in a format that you want, right? So in this case, what you just heard, it transforms into MIDI. It goes out over the iConnect MIDI 4 device here, which allows you to send MIDI at very fast data rates to the iPad, where it's then using that information. But there is OSC, there are other protocols that you can use. You can write your own plugins. Actually, most of the software is open source, except for the GUI editor. So there have been people writing different extensions to it, because a lot of the Eigenharp players are actually also software engineers. So they've written different extensions to integrate with their world in both directions, basically. Okay, so since that neatly brings me to this topic, cheap and powerful computers. So one thing that you have to realize is, for example, the Leap Motion Controller, this is a device that costs $80, and it's extremely precise. If they would have integrated DSP capabilities in here, it would probably have cost $400 or $500, right? And it would be stuck in time. It would only ever be able to do whatever it was designed to do. It would not be able to be upgraded. Same with the Eigenharp. It uses the computers, the modern days computer capability of process so much data so quickly that it allows you to externalize the required digital signal processing and make everything much cheaper. And the last side effect of that is that you can continue using your same instrument, and if you play it for 3 years, you'll buy or you upgrade your computer, and all of a sudden you can do 2 times more. So it means that you can really invest in your digital instrument and have it go to new places if that is what you want to do. And it also allows manufacturers to take that whole piece out of the equation. They don't have to redesign the processing aspect of it over and over and over again, right? So the computers are able to do that, and at the same time, this led obviously into the mobile computers, which are iPads and iPhones, that have similar capabilities and that even more so allow instrument designers to actually leverage that particular part of the equation that already exists without having to redesign it. And another thing that allows you is to use synthesis techniques like piano tech. I don't know, is anyone using piano tech for piano sounds? You should, if you ever want to create some kind of a stringed sound, because they've got a lot of other physical models in there, it is quite staggering how realistic it sounds. Maybe have it on, but let's check. And so the fact that you're able to model an instrument instead of sample it and actually have the interactions of the notes that you play influence each other while you're performing, again goes into the same direction. You will never be playing the same thing twice. Just the simple fact that you will have played the second note of a phrase microsecond later is going to create different vibrations on the other model strings, it's going to create different harmonics, and it's going to inspire you as a musician over and over again. Meaning that you get this creative breeding ground and not a sterile reproduction mechanism of the same sounds that happen over and over again. Which then brings me to actually the third part of three technologies that I wanted to highlight that in my opinion are going to bring electronic music, and are bringing electronic music to the new level in terms of expressiveness, and that is that from the opposite side, so we have the controllers, the people that are interested in creating better ways of expressing yourself while playing. But from the opposite side, we have the iPad and I'd say specifically the iPad and the iPhone, not the Android devices, because what happened was, I heard it was an accident, but Core MIDI and Core Audio was included into the base iOS SDK and distribution, giving every synth maker a common platform to build ideas upon. So again, they didn't have to reinvent the basic building blocks. They didn't have to reinvent how to create sound, they didn't have to reinvent how to react to MIDI and how to process all these different messages and then only get to what's interesting to them, which is the sound that it's going to make, their particular synthesis engine, and the interaction that you have with it. So, since that accelerated the possibilities for synthesis engines to be created, people obviously started experimenting with new ways of leveraging the multi-touch capabilities of the iPad, developing synthesizer techniques that allow expression with each individual finger, which is contrary to MIDI, where expression is supposed to be per device, right? So you get these synths that I personally like a lot. So Animoog, of course, leverages polypressure. It's a good first step. Moog has told me for a while now, but I think it's going to happen finally, that they're going to take it to the next level in a similar way as what Wolfgang Palm has done with his wave generator and wave mapper synths, where he actually uses a technique that's called voice per channel MIDI. People know what that means? So MIDI by default uses one channel for a device, right? So you've got your synthesizer, it's going to be on channel 1, you're going to send data to it, but the problem is that CC messages, pitch bends, and most of the other things that are going on will be for the whole channel. So if you've got multiple notes playing at the same time, you'll bend them all up and you bend them all down, right? So that's kind of limitation. But the way that people have been working around it is to say, okay, well, instead of treating each device as a different channel, why not considering your fingers as 10 different devices? So I've got a device here, I've got a device here, a device here, and they're all different channels. Meaning that for each finger, you actually have a dedicated pitch bend signal and a dedicated CC expression signal, allowing you to get that expression out of it. So this is what Wolfgang Palm implemented in his synthesizers, which then later bled into his VST version of that. So it's kind of, in an interesting way, bleeding back in the opposite direction, going back to the substance on the computer, coming from the multi-touch interface. And then there is another guy, the guy that makes Thumb Jam and Drum Jam. He's one of the first people on the iPad that with Thumb Jam leveraged the per note expression capabilities. And very recently, I started getting into contact with him, and he's got this one app that's called Drum Jam, I'm not sure if I want to demonstrate this, but I forgot to launch it. So let's see if I can do that quickly. Let's hope that it's going to work. So it's starting up. So what Drum Jam does is it allows you to jam with drum patterns and to hit notes and do percussive sounds with it. But it uses the multi-touch interface to allow you. It sounds like a thing. So as I slide over the surface here, I can do the simple taps, but as I slide, I'm going to create a rhythmical pattern. The problem though is, with the iPad is actually, or any tablet at this point, a very, very, very bad device for doing anything with percussion. And the reason for that is exactly the same reason as what I told before, is that the sampling of your fingers is tied to the screen refresh rate. So it's only going to sample data at 60 Hertz, which kind of gives you an implicit jitter of 16 milliseconds, which is a lot when you're doing percussion. So what's interesting though is, by again leveraging that voice per channel approach and the fact that you can get MIDI in there in a high resolution fashion, in a fast speed, you can actually use that with any of the other devices. So this is again going in the other direction by being inspired by the possibilities of a multi-touch interface, which doesn't quite go all the way because the sensor technology is not there. It does allow other instruments like the Eigenharp and the Continuum to reach these levels of expression. So yeah. So final note about that is, this is what MIDI was designed for, and it's been a problem for a long time. Well, actually, 4 years ago, this would not, even 3 years ago, this was not possible, but most of the things I did here, because I used Animoog on the iPad, I used Drum Jam just to do very fast percussion. Because the only way to get MIDI inside the iPad was by using devices that were not designed for these speeds. And they were backing up, they were not allowing you to get the data through. And there's this company called iConnectivity that has been specializing in this. And very recently, they brought out this device, actually became available last week, but I've been beta testing it for a few months. It's called the iConnect MIDI 4 Plus, that solves all the problems in terms of integrating your iPad into your existing workflow. Because not only does it allow you to send MIDI as fast as you can, the Eigenharp sends 6,000 messages for each key per second. So imagine what that is if you're starting to play polyphonically. It's a huge amount of data. You could not even get one axis of one key of the Eigenharp being sent over a legacy MIDI connection. So it sends that through without any problems. And interestingly, since our computing devices are so powerful, as I said before, it just gobbles it all up on the other side and uses it in the synthesis implementation to become expressive. And so the iConnect MIDI devices allow you to stream that through, but they went one step further with their latest versions, is that they also send the audio back. So instead of having to figure out how I'm going to get the audio out of each iPad, it's actually sent back to your computer in a very low latency again. And I mean, you're able to perform with that without noticing it. So I think that this is going to change a lot for many musicians, even if you're not adopting these kind of devices, because any of these iPad synths can become part of your workflow. And yeah, they don't have the tangible knobs that MIDI controllers have, but most MIDI controllers have generic tangible knobs, meaning that you've got a generic layout that you have to figure out to map to the actual control that you're influencing. and it doesn't have any identity, while the front panel of the iPad synths have identity. They look different each time, they inspire you, you know where everything is located, it becomes your playing ground. So even though it doesn't go the full way in terms of interacting with knobs, it still, in my opinion, actually is better than the generic mapping mechanisms, because you have this character, this uniqueness of a particular synth model right in front of you. You can touch it and you can move it. So, these are the implications that I already talked about. The fact that you get so much information in there allows you as a musician to want to, again, like it has been for so many centuries, to have to figure out how you're going to tame the chaos of the vibrations, of the natural oscillations, of the natural sensors that pick up every little detail. Just as with a guitar, you'll be wondering about string rattle, string noise, about if is it going to be humid or not, am I tired or not? All these things change your performance, and in my opinion, make it humane and musical. And allow you, as a musician, to not only have this being translated into sound, since you hear it so quickly, the sensor technology is so fast, you have this inspiring feedback that allows you to be creative. And this is what allows me, in any way, to find new ideas, to find new musical pieces. It's by just playing, mucking around, and then all of a sudden you've got this thing that feels emotional, that connects to your gut, that you can manipulate in real time while staying in your space. And that's kind of the phrase that I like to use, and that Roger Lynn likes to use also, is you are the one that plays the envelope generator. Instead of having something do that for you, instead of having a synthesizer that will modulate very elaborately a lot of the expressive parameters of the sound, you are the one doing that. And this allows you, during your performance, to make a lot of performance decisions and to create unique performances. So that's it. If you've got any other questions, please ask. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah. Well, first, thank you for making Gecko for the emotion. I use it to control audio and video in Resolute at the same time. So it's very expressive. But it's interesting because you finally get to use your hands, but there are constraints because it's a little window. So you move to Maya, where you start to lose those constraints. So musicians, while we're performers, are not necessarily elaborate physical gestural performers. And you're really on the forefront of starting to break those boundaries. How important is these sort of human factors, how cool you look, aspects of the motions, important to your design?
So I'll summarize it if people didn't hear what your question was. That was a long question. So how does the coolness factor of your musical gesture interaction is important to the applications that I've created, specifically Gecko? It was actually one of the first things on my mind. Because if anyone that uses a Leap motion controller, I'm only using a fraction of what it's capable to do. It's actually possible to detect the tips of your fingers individually. They will be detected at the same speed as your hands. The different positions of your finger will be detected. But the problem is, I could not imagine a musician performing like that. It kind of doesn't look very cool. Right? So I think it took me about 3 months with experimenting and actually dialing down more and more of the features that I thought would feel but also look good and give this immediate interaction between the audience and the performer. And there is something about seeing what a musician does and hearing it being translated into sound. I think we lost a lot of that with the laptops and the synthesizers. A lot of it is hidden. People even hide the computers now just to not show them. But at the same time, you have to fill up space with something else. People have to start dancing, you have to start adding things to the performance just to make that sound interesting to the audience. And I think that by using gesture control, we can combine that again. So the answer is very important. Okay, yes sir?
The gecko, I know how it relates to the ancestor one. Does it also relate to Maya?
So the question is, does Gecko, which is written for the Leap Motion Controller, relate to Mayo, which is a new device that has not really got an app yet? I think they complement each other. Because as you mentioned, Gecko gives you a malleable space in which you are extremely precise, while Mayo allows you to get outside of that space, to be less precise, but to still be able to interact with your sound. And one of the images that I see in front of me, I can see these islands of expression on stage, where you've got multiple Leap Motion controllers laid out, and based on the physical position on stage, you're able to perform differently. And in the meantime, you have Mayo that allows you to still perform when going from one area to the other. So that's kind of the idea that I have about that, is that they complement each other.
Gecko can integrate with other types of motion controllers?
So the question is, can Gecko, that the software I wrote, integrate with other motion controllers? No, not yet, because none of them are as precise as the Leap Motion controller. I tried some of the Creative Labs ones. Kinect 1 is just too slow. Kinect 2, I haven't had. I'm not sure if the SDK is open now. I heard that they were working on it, but I'm not sure how far along that is. But I intend to take a look at it, see if it works or not. Yes, and something else that I wanted to mention for you probably is going to be interesting. There is a plan for Leap Motion to actually allow you to combine multiple devices to create larger spaces. But it's kind of far out. But it's part of their original design, so it's probably going to come one day. Yes, sir?
You haven't done so. Could you explain how the term Eigenharp came about?
Okay, so the question is, where does the name Eigenharp come from? I've had the story told to me also, because I joined the company after the physical device was created. It's basically, they put a bunch of, I think about 15 possible names on a sheet of paper, gave it to some students in a pub. They let them drink all night, and the one that they preferred at the end of the night was Eigenharp, and that's what it ended up being. Yes. Yes, sir? Yes, you can try it afterwards, it's no problem. Yeah, sure. Yes, sir?
Software question. About the implications of taking the tremendous amount of data generating as you're playing, dumping it into NoSQL to like instances, and using that as a meta recording platform or something along those lines. I mean, probably can't be real time, but it might have
It's possible. So the question is, can you use the amount of data you get out of the instrument to do something else as direct musical expression? To aggregate that amount of data and I know, infer information from it, or maybe build models from it, or is that correct? Yeah. It's totally possible. So one of the things I did write was an emulator to play Guild Wars 2 with the Eigenharp. So I thought it was kind of fun to do. So it allows you to control the mouse and to emulate a keyboard, and at the same time also build another thing that just stores all the information on disk, so that afterwards it can build tablature from it. The way that the Eigenharp software is constructed is, I don't know if you were there from the beginning, but I mentioned that it's open source, so you can write your own modules that you can hook up a little bit like in MaxMSP, and all the data streams will get into the plugin that you write, and it will be full rate. It will not be decimated. It will not be MIDI. It will be the actual sensor data, which is one of the cool things about the Eigenharp, is that it goes full rate towards the computer, and then you do with it what you want. Yes, sir?
So then if you explore the idea of, instead of doing traditional, like you played that beautiful piece, so instead of recording the audio and then distributing that audio to the world, you can record all the metadata, distribute just the metadata and let other people actually customize their own sounds for your performance?
So the question is, this allows you to record the metadata instead of the audio? Yes, theoretically yes, but interestingly, similarly to being a guitar player, I don't know if you've ever played with a guitar and effects and stuff like that, your performance, once you start playing an instrument that is as expressive, your performance is tied to the feedback that you get from the sound. And once you change the sound, it's actually going to start sucking, because it doesn't sound good anymore. That direct interaction between the different harmonical information that happens will be broken. So theoretically, it's possible, but I have my doubts about the usefulness. Yes, Jim?
Can you talk a little about which software applications work well, maybe a little bit also about what software doesn't work, or what problems there are?
Okay, so you mean in terms of soft synths or recording environments? So the question is, which software is able to leverage the kind of information that's being sent, but these new alternative controllers, right? It depends on what level you want to use it. If you want to play monophonic lines, all of them, right? If you treat it as a solo monophonic instrument that has expression right under your fingertip, which is already a nice benefit, it will all work. The trouble starts when you treat it as a polyphonic instrument and you want to have expression individually in real time for each finger. Again, the answer is they will all work, but most of them will be extremely hard to set up or very tedious, because basically what you end up doing for most of the software synthesizers is you're going to tie a synthesizer to each finger. You're going to use the different channels that each note is being sent on as a direct connection between one particular instance of that software, and you have as many instances as you want to have polyphony. That's one way of doing it. Now, there are other software synthesizers that were specifically designed for it. Omnisphere started going kind of halfway, because Jordan Rudess was using the continuum and needed some ways of actually being able to program his sounds more easily. What Omnisphere allows you to do is to change your patch on the first part in your multi, and then with a click, copy it over to all the other parts of the multi. So at that point they will be identical and they will be treated as several separate instances of the same synthesizer, and that gives you kind of a halfway experience. It's still tedious to constantly click on that copy. It's not even a button, it's like a menu item, so it's right click, go to the menu item, copy, and then copy to the other. So that's, well, it's halfway, so Omnisphere works. But then I think Wolfgang Palm is kind of the forerunner here. He was extremely open-minded towards this when I contacted him about it. It was quite funny. I'm very passionate about it, so when I find a synth that I like, I basically just try to figure out the contact details, and I will contact the creator and say, hey, can we do something together? I'll test it out for you, I'll even code it for you if you want to, just give me the code, but I'd like this to get in your soft synth. And Wolfgang Palm was initially a little bit hesitant. He said, who's going to use this? And then I said, well, if you think about it, all iPad apps that use virtual MIDI connections are able to use this. So you've got GeoSynth that is able to use this. Even Animo can send out polypressure to other. A lot of the apps become controllers that are able to do this. And he said, yeah, huh. And I think it took 3 hours or something like that. And he said, hey, I've got a surprise for you. Here's the first version. Obviously it was the first version, but still it was a very nice interaction with Wolfgang Palm, and he then ported that to WaveMapper, and then afterwards to Wave Generators VST, which works extremely well. Then in terms of recording, I personally just record audio. I treat it as a traditional instrument. It works fine. And it's got this, I like the aspect of this is gonna be the unique solo performance of what I'm playing. I'm not gonna tweak it afterwards. It's gonna be what it is. And often you get this kind of creation, emotional feeling and this inspiration that happens on the spot due to those constraints. But if you want to, Cubase actually has, in VST 3.5, per note VST parameters. So I think as of Cubase 6 or 6.5, you can stream in voice per channel MIDI. It will detect it, it will record it as different expression signals on each note that you can individually edit and then get into the synths that you're using. Sadly though, they have one little part missing, is that they don't automatically translate this to the VST 3.5 per note parameters, but it's something that you can do manually. So I think that, those are kind of the, not to forget, sorry, I'll get to that. Logic Pro X has added support for it. So quite a few of the built-in synths support per note expression. Sculpture doesn't do it yet, I think, but the other synths in there support per note expression, which is quite interesting because the audio unit format actually has supported it for quite a few years, but no one was using it. And so they're now finally using it, which is quite interesting. But I don't know how they handle the notation. I haven't tried it yet. Yes, sir?
I was going to ask about Logic Pro X, so you just answered that.
Okay.
But what about Ableton?
I'm personally not an Ableton user because it's so different in terms of metaphor and the way of interacting with music. From what I've heard, it's going in the right direction because they have to support push, which has polypressure that's being sent out. So while I remember 4 years ago, Ableton was very rudimentary in terms of its MIDI support. That's what people told me. It's not from my own experience. I figure that since push is there now, they're gonna have, or they are already supporting it in a much better way because it's part of their product line. So it's quite interesting, I think, that a software like Live is, and a company like Ableton is seeing that need of continuous expression on a pad even, and then bringing the software into that direction. Okay, so if there are not any questions anymore, thanks. Yes, Jim? Oh, okay, I can play a little more.
Sure. You want to play it too?
Let's see.
Play it about a week.
Yeah, no, actually, speaking of Jordan Rudess, that's the first thing that he showed me on his Pico. And I was like, oh my God, I'm disgusted. I will never be able to do that. Yeah. Let's see here. Oh yeah, I didn't mention that, but so the interface to the Eigenharp, it's quite surprising that no one asked it, because usually what people ask about that. This is all customized by me, no one has this particular setup, which is quite interesting because most Eigenharp players have their own setup. And then you pick up the instruments and what is it doing? But yeah, I like that, the fact that it's totally customized.
Gerrit, you might want to mention Antonio's way of setting up for concerts where you can't actually see what he's playing. In terms of limiting, one of the Eigenharp players in Portugal who performs quite often with a dance company has customized the keys so that he can't play a wrong note. He's only got the notes in the song that he needs. As just an example of just how customizable the layout is.
Yeah, have you talked, sorry I didn't hear you, I was concentrating. But he also did, I don't know if you mentioned it, he stuck two Picos together, so the small ones. He stuck them together in the reverse order to create a bigger instrument out of it. And since it's so flexible, he was able to create a setup that really works. And so he's got like a hybrid instrument, which actually looks kind of cool, I think. Okay, thanks a lot. And if you want to try it out, if you want to lay your hands on it, come on over and we'll do that.
I was just wondering that. I think so. Yeah.